Welcome to Raging Bullets, a comic fans podcast, Season 2, Episode 756.
Sean and Jim are back again, talking comic books with all their friends.
They'll spoil a story and break it down. These two guys talking comics are the best around. Raging Bullets,
The podcast show.
Raging Bullets,
The podcast show.
Welcome to Raging Bullets. I am Sean Whalen, drnorge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot, the Duke of the Salt and Strategery. Once had childhood aspirations to be either Blob or Toad, so says the sensei of the whatnot, Segulent.
How's it going, hey?
Jim, on this episode, we're going to be talking about Marvel Superhero Secret Wars issues 1 through 3. We are sponsored, as always, by DCB Service at InStockTrades.com. What is going on over at DCBService.com?
We have Giant Size X-Men Tribute to Wayne and Cochran. This is the recreating Len Wein and Dave Cochran's Giant Size X-Men. It's 36 of Marvel's top artists. Each are recreating one page. So it's a tribute to the two of them, which I think is absolutely awesome. It's 36% off. Only $19.19. I was like, dang, that is cool. But also then right next to it, I saw Godzilla Verse. And I started seeing all the different Godzilla. We got Godzilla versus the Fantastic Four, Godzilla versus the Hulk. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a cool story.
That Wein and Cochran book that you're talking about, is that a hardcover collection?
It's a trade paper.
Okay, because that Giant Size X-Men tribute that was something that came out in 2021, the tribute. So I don't know if this is this a re-release of that? Because it was 37 artists, right?
Yeah, they're saying 36 artists are recreating it.
That was done in 2020. I think at least 2020. It was that was years ago. So they're re-releasing it. The reason why I'm referencing it is it's really good. So I'm not trying to cut you off in the ad. This is more of this was great. I actually have read this before, so it's very. I mean, I'm an X-Men junkie. I didn't know that it was being collected in some form. I wonder if there's extra stuff in it. This has me intrigued. So you're captivating me with what you're sharing. So I'm likely going to be grabbing this just because of the fact that if there's extras in it, they've got me.
Awesome.
Over at InStockTrades.com. DC's finest, Teen Titans, the Judas Contract trade paperback, $39.99, regularly 55% off, only $17.99. Flash by Mark Waid, Omnibus Hardcover Volume 2, $150, regularly 50% off, only $75. Two versions of Secret Wars by Hickman Omnibus. So this is another one of the Secret Wars series. This one is maybe somewhere down the road we'll do it. $100 regularly, 46% off, only $54. And Vinland Saga Deluxe Hardcover Volume 6, $54.99 regularly, 45% off, only $30.24. Thank you, DCB Service and InStockTrades.com for continuing to support our show. And I'm sorry for cutting you off there. I was just intrigued by what you were sharing. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, they're releasing that again? I'm actually going to, after we're done recording here, I'm going to go check out, like, what that is, because I think I'm going to want to grab it. But without further ado, Mr. Segulin, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on today's show. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Let's talk some comics.
He really grows on you, doesn't he?
So, Jim, before we jump into talking about Secret Wars, I think it'd be good to talk about our history about this. So this came out in May 1984 and ran to April of 1985. Did you read this as it was like? What was your experience with this? Did you and I, grew up? Obviously, we're the same age, so we grew up at the same time. We had experience with I had a lot of experience with comics growing up. You had experience with comics growing up too. Where was Secret Wars in your? Is it something you read?
I remember reading it. I remember getting it from comic shops and all that stuff. And I vividly remember this thing. But apparently my memory is not that good. Because when I started reading this, stuff started coming back. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Oh, I forgot about that. There was parts that I 100% had a pure crystal clear memory of. Mm-hmm. The mountain scene that we're going to talk in issue 4. I 100% remember all the details of that part of it, but the rest of issue 4 I had no memory of. You know, and you think back to, you know, when we talk about it, there's a bunch of stuff that happened there. I didn't remember any of that, you know, and it was like the ending. I remembered some of the ending, but not all of it. And so it was kind of interesting when I was reading it, because I've read all 12 issues. I didn't do what we normally, I just do the 3 issues and stop. I didn't do that this time. I'm like, I gotta keep reading. Because I'm like, I gotta know, you know, because there are parts in like issue 1, 2, and 3 that I remember part 1, but not part 2 and 3. You know, there's like, it's weird. Like my memory on this is spotty. You know, and I 100% remember going to the comic shop over on 185th Street. You know, and that's where I got these issues at. You know, because, you know, I went in there, oh, it's right over there. Okay, cool. You know, this is kind of neat. You know, I'm talking to the guy who ran the shop. I remember having conversations with that guy about Secret Wars. You know, so it's funny that I don't remember pieces of it, but I remember, you know, it's so my memory. And again, part of that is just my memory, but part of it is.
Now, did you read it? Did you read it as it was coming? Because you mentioned a comic shop on 185th. I don't remember there being one there until we were in high school. Did you read it as it was coming out or afterwards?
I thought, okay, so that's the thing. Now,
did you read it well, let's go another route with this. Did you read it in singles or in a trade?
See, I remember reading it in single.
Okay, so you probably read it as it was coming out. And the other reason why I'm referencing that is you and I obviously live in the same area. I'm trying to remember when we had a comic shop in 185th, because I got mine at Comics and Collectibles at Shoregate Shopping Center. I remember picking that up as it was coming out, and I don't remember, and I might be wrong on this, I don't remember there being a comic shop at 185th at that time, but maybe there was. So anyway, go ahead back where you were going.
And actually, now as we're talking, I'm thinking maybe I was going to Comics and Collectibles and getting this, and the 185th one conversation was the Operation Galactic Storm thing that they had going on.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the one I talked to that 185th guy about. You know, again, it's memory issues with me. Sometimes this stuff gets blurry. You know, and that's one of the interesting things when we go back to stuff from our childhood, you know, and I read it and I'm like, I read that. I know I read it. And now I'm like, oh, yeah, I remember that. Now I don't remember that piece, you know, and like creative, like back when we were a kid, when this came out, I didn't know anybody's names. I didn't know Jim Shooter wrote this thing until just now, until I started reading it for the show. I'm like, oh, wow, that's neat. I didn't know he wrote this. So this has been just, again, a really trippy thing for me, because there are moments where I 100% completely picture perfect, clear memory of it. Then others, I was like, I don't remember that at all. When did that? Wow. Oh, wow. I missed that.
So I deliberately stuck to the issues that we're reading today. And the main reason why I did that is because I don't want to jump ahead.
Yeah.
And I'll do that if I start reading it ahead. When I was reading those issues, I felt like a kid again.
Yeah.
I actually vividly remember taking the cover of this, the first cover, and tracing it, like with tracing paper, with some designs that like I would be able to somehow create comics myself at some point. This one really hit me. I was a big time Uncanny X-Men reader when this came out. For people listening to this, if you did not grow up in the 80s and or you know were before, didn't hit this event, we're very used to now events being a thing, and events driving how we interact with comic book universes. They're kind of a center tentpole driving storylines. Back in this era, this was different. This was very experimental. When you got these, the cool part about this was that this story, there's a specific issue in most of the titles that lead into this that shows you when the characters went to Secret Wars. The next issue is after Secret Wars. You know, and there's very specific tie-in issues like, and actually I shouldn't say that it's that clean for every book, because some of the books have a more of a longer form with this one. But I remember there was Uncanny X-Men. There was a few issues in particular that dealt with what was going on in Secret Wars. This, for every character that was in it, or every main character that was in it, there was some serious impact from this event. This did something to the universe. This wasn't an isolated event. It wasn't a movie of the week. This was something that really did. And at that time, it was like, whoa, super cool to see all of these characters mashed up together. And I think what was smart about it, and it's something we're going to talk about during that, was you could have gone out of your way to keep good guys on this side, bad guys on this side. This story doesn't do that cleanly. And I forgot how smart it was. And I don't know that I appreciated how smart it... I mean, I loved it. I mean, this is a story I read over and over and over again. So I remember rushing to Comics and Collectibles when the issues would come out. Back in those days, if they ran out of an issue of a particular title and it was something hot, you hoped that they would get a reorder or that there would be a second printing and you'd somehow be able to get access to that book. Because if not, there weren't a lot of comic shops around. So we were doing our little tete-a-tete as far as, was there a shop on 185th or not? Doesn't matter. We didn't have many choices. Whereas right now, it's very easy for us in very short distance to be able to jump to comic shops. Even in an era right now where comic shops are struggling, where we've got, a number of comic shops that are struggling with just today's climate and everything like that, we've still got quite a few comic shops now in comparison to when we grew up. And I love the fact that we have those because you had to rush to get this bad boy. I don't remember seeing this on many newsstands.
It's funny you're saying this, and I'm getting now a memory flashback. Mm-hmm. And it's like super trippy. Issue 12, It wasn't there. They sold out.
Oh, wow.
And I remember my dad drove me to Parma.
Oh, sweet.
To the comic shop it's the comic shop actually. It's still there. It's the one comic shop that I have gone to a couple times. Drove me to that shop to see it, and then I got the last issue at that comic shop for issue 12. Mm-hmm. I'm now. It's funny you're talking about this, and I'm remembering that because I remember I asked Mom and Dad if they could go out to that shop. Like, sure. Dad was not a happy camper, but he still did it because Mom asked him to do it.
What were you reading at this time? Like, do you remember? I mean, it's kind of hard to kind of place
X's.
That. Okay.
This was my X phase.
So when you say X's, there weren't X's. There was Uncanny.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. We're used to right now there being so many X titles, and I really enjoy that. But back then, it was Uncanny X-Men. That was what you were reading at that point in time in order to get your X-Men fix. A very, very different era. That kind of set, no Wolverine solo title. New Mutants hadn't been a thing yet. It was a very, very different era in Marvel.
G.I. Joe was out at this time, right?
Ooh.
I'm trying to remember if I was also reading, because there was a period where I was reading G.I. Joe and X-Men.
You got an excellent memory, because I was actually looking back and trying to place when did G.I. Joe as a comic series actually start. And it looks like it was 1982 to 1994. And so I would have been reading G.I. Joe during this time, too.
Okay, yeah.
It was an interesting era with comics, with what was going on then. Because that was, the cartoon would have been on then, and the comic series was going, and the toy line was pretty hot. So there was a lot of cool stuff going on. So why don't we start jumping in and start talking about this series? So Marvel Superhero Secret Wars, the writer was Jim Shooter. Pencilers on this series were Mike Zeck and Bob Layton. Inkers were John Beatty with Jack Abel and Mike Esposito. Colorists were Christy Scheel and Nell Yomtov. The letterer is Joe Rosen. The editor is Tom DeFalco. And apologies if I got any name butchery in this one because it's such a classic series. So you mentioned earlier, and I want to jump back to something that you said about Jim Shooter, that you didn't know that Jim Shooter wrote this. I'll tell you why I did. And it was, I'm not going to pretend that I was as versed on comic creators as I am now. Even now, I'm constantly trying to, when I jump into something new, getting to know the creators that are on there. But Jim Shooter had taken over for Stan Lee. And I remember becoming much more aware of Jim Shooter, not for writing, but for running Marvel Comics, and kind of, because Stan's soapbox went away at a certain point in time. I don't remember if it was this era, but Jim Shooter's name came up as both a writer running the whole shebang over at Marvel. Because there was a certain definitive point where Stan's soapbox went away and it was Jim Shooter talking to us. I just remember the distinction of the era.
It's funny with me and creators back when I was a kid. The only name I knew was Stan Lee. I served, and as throughout, I'll say even through high school. It wasn't until college that I started noticing names, but I really didn't even notice them that well.
Yeah.
Again, our show is what really got me looking and noticing and following creators and whatnot. Back in this day, though, I 100%, I don't even think I read the names of the creators. I just dove in and started reading the comics,
Jim Aparo, over on the DC side, I'm not meaning to be insulting by doing the two versions of the name. As a kid, you get the name in your head, but his Batman work was something that stood out for me. John Buscema, the artist at Marvel, was somebody. There was a Marvel drawing book, like how to draw comics the Marvel way, that he did, and I remember greatly his work in Marvel Comics, and I was enjoying it. But on the writer side, the writer that really clicked with me first, and I mentioned on the show, Chris Claremont was the one. So this was the era where, because of Claremont, I was paying attention to creators. And it really was the work of Chris Claremont and John Byrne over on the X-Men side that were the ones that really got me. I wanted to see, it didn't matter if they were doing something else other than Uncanny X-Men. I wanted to read that work. I wanted to see the art. I wanted to read the story. So they were creators. I started becoming creator loyal, where I was branching out based on the fact that the creator was doing a mini series, or doing another series. John Byrne eventually did Alpha Flight, and Claremont did something called Black Dragon, which was really cool. That I really enjoyed. He did Contest of Champions too, and stuff like that. I started following creators. But Shooter was an interesting one with this. This cover is outstanding. It still, to me, to this day, makes me geek out as a kid. I traced it and was coloring it. I thought I did have some like crazy designs. Like, I have. By the way, I want to be very, very clear to everybody listening. I have zero artistic talent. But this was me as a kid, just really trying to, I guess, connect more with the comics, because I read this thing dozens and dozens of times, as well as going through enjoying the art, things like that. That's why I'm a big believer in doing it now, because I find that I'm enjoying comics more when I do that piece. This artwork on the front is beautiful.
Oh my God, dude! This should be a poster. This is something I would want.
I'm pretty sure it is.
I know it is.
Yeah,
it's out there. I know that, but it's still. This is something that. I would like to go and get signed and have hanging on my wall, You can
get, if you Shooter, when he goes to comic conventions, because I have some of these, he brings prints with him and he signs them. So this will be there. I mean, it's so if you see him, he's been at GalaxyCon Columbus multiple times. I don't think he's coming to Fan Expo Cleveland, but that's another good event. But GalaxyCon Columbus, he's been there for the last 3 years, I think. And he always brings oversized, like large prints of various covers that either he wrote or ones that he was the editor-in-chief during that era, big eras of Marvel, so there's some really cool ones. I know for sure, because I have it, the first issue with Spidey's black costume. I have that. I actually have that signed and framed in my basement.
Oh, that is another one I would love to have.
Yeah. So I know we had Secret Wars 1. It's funny looking at this right now. I'm regretting that I didn't grab that too. I kind of jumped around. I got a New Mutants cover. I got the last Jean Grey apparent. The Death of Jean Grey issue from X-Men signed by him. So I did. I did 3. There was like a deal if you got 3 of them, and I'm like, I'm going to kind of dance around and do a few things. But that Spider-Man cover was such a pivotal one that I ended up grabbing. This story was intriguing because I like that the heroes, as we're kicking off, are just dropped into this. Yeah. And, it's kind of a mishmash. They weren't together. Mike Zeck, as an artist, is somebody who I don't reference him enough on the podcast as being one of my favorite artists growing up, but he absolutely 1000% was. And it's work like this. When you get to that War Begins splash page and you see everybody there, as an X-Men fan at the time, I was seeing all of my heroes, but I was also reconnecting with favorites from Marvel team-up years. I've always been growing up. I was a big Hulk fan. I loved the Hulk TV show. I loved Hulk cartoons. Any comic, like I remember I had a Batman and Hulk Treasury edition where they were fighting each other. I love the Hulk. Hulk is a great character. Spider-Man was my guy. I mean, it was Batman and Spider-Man that brought me to the dance, and really much more Marvel team up in the comics end. But because of that, these are old friends that I was encountering if they weren't in the X-Book. Just because I had seen them team up with Spidey at some point in time in Marvel team up. But this is beautiful artwork. And I love that they're as puzzled as we are as readers. That was really accessible because they don't know where they are. They don't know why they've been put there. They weren't together when they were on Earth, so just being kind of dumped in. And also, they weren't all in their costumes where they were previously. So now they're plopped in this place, and they're plopped into this place in uniform, which is really different and alarming. And I loved that kind of opening piece. I didn't remember that standing out like in years ago when I read it when I was younger. I really appreciated it now as being the kind of the entry point into the series.
It's funny when, again, opening up, and I'm nodding my head, goofishly as you're saying how wonderful the art team and just the look of the book and all that. Because again, no idea. As a kid, who this guy was or any of that stuff, so, just you go through and this opening page, and I can remember as a kid being surprised by the Hulk because I remember, when I was first reading it, wait, Hulk's intelligent? Because I didn't know Hulk was intelligent. I still really haven't read any solo Hulk books.
Really?
Yeah. I always think about doing it, but I never actually go around and grabbing a solo Hulk title.
Here's the thing. You will.
Yeah, I know. We're going to.
We're going to have to do that, yeah. Because there's actually, we should actually, we'll skip around, and do them at some point in time. We can take snapshots of some different runs, where you see a more savage Hulk, but also there's been various different versions of the intelligent Hulk that we can have a whole bunch of fun with.
Yeah. Like I read, he did a crossover with Wolverine, that I remember reading, but that was the gray Hulk, not the green intelligent Hulk.
Joe Fixit.
Yeah, Joe Fixit. Yeah. And then there was another story where the Hulk completely lost all humanity, and it took everybody to put him down. And I remember there was a sequence where Captain Marvel turned into pure gamma radiation and flew through him to try to drop him, and that only made him mad. And there was a sequence where he punched somebody through multiple buildings. And I don't remember who he punched through, but I remember reading the comic and flipping the page multiple times, for him because he knocked someone through that many buildings, but again, I don't even remember what issue or what comic that was in. But, so it's weird with me and the Hulk. And I remember completely when I was first reading this, that intelligent Hulk completely threw me for a loop going, and they later explained that he's got Banner's brain. So it made perfect sense to me. Oh, okay. And I remember as a kid going, okay, he's got Banner's brain. That's kind of neat. And I never followed up on it.
What's interesting is they're put in these little constructs that are, taking them to, they're going to eventually take them to this battle world that we're going to see. Villains are pulled into the same way. And I don't know. You mentioned before things you didn't remember. I remember almost everything about this story. I did not remember Galactus. And I absolutely loved the use of Galactus in this. That was something that really stood out where I'm like, boy, I'm catching at, the Absorbing Man and his whole gang, the Wrecking Crew and all that. I remembered that. I remembered Ultron. I remembered Doom, Molecule Man, everybody like that. I was like, all these people. Kang, I don't remember Kang either. It was the two other pieces that they didn't stand out to me very much, but everybody else in the cast with the villains, I remembered being there. Galactus, the largest guy, I didn't remember him being there. Did you remember Galactus being a part of this?
As you're talking, I'm like, no. I did not remember Kang, Galactus, and Ultron. I did not remember Ultron. So again, when we went to this page and flipped the page, I saw Galactus. I'm like, wait, he was in on this?
Mm-hmm.
I did not remember that at all. All the Galactus, for whatever reason, I completely forgot them. And later on, there's a scene with Galactus. I'll tell you what I remembered of that scene.
Okay.
And it wasn't Galactus. But Ultron, I 100% did not remember him or Kang. Or maybe, again, I may not have known who Kang was at the time. Now, I'm trying to, I don't know if there's no Kang stories that stand out for me. So I may not have known who he was, and that's probably why I forgot him. But everybody else, I completely remembered.
You mentioned something interesting. What I love about team-up books like this, where you get these large casts of characters, there are going to be characters, and Kang's a great example of that. I didn't know a whole lot about Kang at the time either. There are characters who I was getting to know because of this series. And I remember that being something that really stood out for me from this, how much I was enjoying seeing those characters together. I loved the use of Magneto in this.
Yes.
Particularly in the beginning where, like, we've got all the good guys on one thing, and I like that the things the ones like sitting there saying, "What's this guy doing here?" And everybody's kind of in the same place because Magneto's been kind of legendary in the Marvel universe, and also being somebody who has caused deaths, caused destruction, things like that. I like that Xavier is like the voice of reason, trying to calm down Magneto. This is an example of these are two giant ships without captains. The villains and the heroes both have the same problem right now. And I'm not trying to do a pun by saying without captains, but the irony was striking me as far as who they end up deciding to be their leader over there. But the Beyonder was something that was incredibly interesting to me because we gradually are getting this idea of some power that has done this. And I really liked in this series, and I don't want to talk too much about it. We'll talk a little bit more as we get into issue 12, because at some point in time, maybe we can talk about Secret Wars too. But what I really liked about this was the use of Beyonder as this big kind of energy being that there's a mystery to it. And I really liked that. There's so many interesting layers to this story that they could have settled on the laurels of let's just put them together and let them fight and do splash page after splash page and do that. This is not that. This is really a smart story that really does a lot with character development, especially with the fact that even with the Avengers being there, who are characters that know each other, there's some people in that like are reservists that aren't normally on the team. And the actual leader of the team right now is Wasp. So it's interesting that the story references those pieces and those changes that the Beyonder was really pulling in. He was treating the planet Earth like a toy chest and was pulling like his favorite figures out to play with. And
exactly.
And he's like, and who would be the foil for this guy? And I love so much that it plays out that way. And it made this really, really fun reading. I love reading this now, because this story means so much to me that it's fun to come back and visit it. I didn't realize how long it had been since I read this. And as I was coming back to it, because I had to have read it again at some point in time in college, I think. But that's been a long time ago now. So it's interesting to come back to see this now and really have a chance to revisit it.
Yeah, and again, it's stuff that I notice now that I obviously didn't notice back then. Mm-hmm. When the Beyonder is pulling that planet together.
Yeah. He's
taking a piece from this planet, a piece from this planet, a piece from this planet, and throwing that together. So just like he did with the heroes and the villains on Earth, he's doing the same thing to other places.
Well, he destroyed a galaxy to be able to build that planet.
Yeah.
Which is so, totally building off what you're saying. They're watching in awe as he just like wiped out a universe. And he's pulling a galaxy. He's pulling like planets from that galaxy together, exactly like you're saying. But I mean, imagine watching it destroyed. Then you're going to a planet that this being's destroyed. The powerless feeling of that moment. Seeing Doom in awe. And they did this real well with Iron Man, and they did it with Doom too. I was always impressed with artists who were able to take these metal masks and give them expression, but yet still have them feel like they're metal masks.
Yes.
And in both cases, if you see Iron Man on the page before with his shock and awe, and you see Doom, you're seeing it in the face. But that's a metal mask. And yet, I'm buying into the fact that it's still a metal mask.
Yes, 100%. And again, I agree with you completely on that. The two sequences, for me, Doom, I think that's the one that when I was reading through this, I was like, oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
I agree with you. I like how they did Iron Man with, because you really got to have the big eyes going, oh, crud. But Doom, especially just the humbling of it, because he sees, and again, he's like Richards, going through the mathematical calculations on what kind of power it would take to do that. And he's just like, oh, crud. That's beyond anything I could even imagine, much less do. And I loved the fact that Doom's going, whoa.
This was the story that really, because I remember Doom was in an Uncanny X-Men story arc. So I remember him from that. I knew of Doom from issues of Fantastic Four, but it was, you get those 3-packs of comics.
Yeah.
Where there was like a book or two that you were looking to grab, and there was that third book in the middle and things like that. A lot of times my exposure to books were that, and then you'd never get like an issue for, 6 to 8 months or more of even anything close to that series. So I knew who Doom was, always liked the character. I was more familiar of him, I think at this point he had been in Uncanny X-Men. And so I knew I was very versed on the character as far as knowing the basics of him being Fantastic Four's villain. Yeah. But this story was the one that really let me know about his quest for power, his intelligence, and also his ego, and the way his ego played out. It was interesting. You've got similar qualities to him and Magneto, but very distinct differences in this. And it was great to see those two big, powerful personalities in the same story, because if you don't know anything about them, these first few issues of this are really good primers on who these characters are. Doom wants to come in and Doom wants to rule. And Doom needs everyone to bow down and kind of help with his agenda of, I am going to be the most powerful guy in the room. Basically, everybody else, he is willing to completely ignore if there is an opportunity for him to ascend to some form of higher power. His curiosity, his quest, overtakes everything else. And I really loved how this story just really laid out for me who Doom is. When you've got a Magneto who's kind of a gray area in this story as well, and he's doing his own thing, I really love that you start seeing how these little camps have a genesis in the very early parts of this story, because they're thrust together and you see that this isn't going to last long for pretty much either team in the way that they're going together, but it looks very different on the villain side than it does on the hero side. Still, there's still a unique nature to those characters, because on the villain side, pretty much in very short order, they're blasting each other.
Yes. Ultron.
Yes.
Again, I didn't remember Ultron being in this. Mm-hmm. So for me, I was reading this going, oh, that makes sense. Ultron must destroy. It doesn't matter if they're good guys or bad guys. He must destroy. This is who Ultron is. And I was reading this for the first time going, this is awesome. And it's funny, Molecule Man, mm-hmm. I had no idea who I remember as a kid, I had no idea who Molecule Man was. But by the end of Secret Wars, I was like, oh, he's a pretty cool character. I liked who especially how things go on with the character in the series, but I don't remember any of these sequences with Ultron, but it's, seeing how Molecule Man is initially, where he's just like, no, I can't do that. I'm just plain Owen Reese now. And he's got all these just personal, issues. And I get you, man. And I feel for you, and he just, and it's Doom being Doom, taking advantage of the situation. No, you have to do this. Here, just use a simple push. Just push him a little bit. He's like, okay, that's not too bad. And and I love reading this going, why of course would he want Ultron pushed into Galactus? Well, to get his notice.
Yeah, it was Molecule Man was fantastic, because that was one of my first experiences with this idea that villains could be somehow rehabilitated. And Molecule Man was kind of that in going through this process in it. And I really liked the idea of, Owen Reese. Okay, who's Owen and what's his whole story? Like you, I didn't know anything about Molecule Man going into this. Fell in love with the character and wanted to see more. This is what they were setting the stage with this. This is revolutionary, this story. Yeah. Because they were setting the stage for what a really strong event would be. I mean, we had a whole year of little over a year of this with how it released. Going from March to April of the following year, it was really, really impressive. So, I remember at the time, we're so used to, I think, the immediacy now of a lot of these things wrap up in 6 months, and that's sometimes a long one. We get every so often these maxi series, and when they come out, it's like, wow, a whole year of this, super cool. This one was that, and I really, really enjoyed that. Galactus, as I started to reread it again and was getting my way through, I'm like, okay, I do remember it took I'm going to be honest with you, it took I don't know if it's what it was about my third read through. My third read through, I started clicking to, I do remember that. Okay, I kind of remember that. Now, there were certain things that were clicking. How much of that was the fact that I'd already done 3 read throughs of this, and how much of it was actual memory from my childhood, I don't really know. But Galactus was somebody I found very interesting. My reading from Galactus was from the public library. So we're used to right now when you go into the public library, there being current trade collections that are in there. And if you're listening to this and you're like budget strapped and you're trying to look for comics, do yourself a favor and check out the public library. My gosh, the amount of stuff, especially from interlibrary alone, if your library doesn't have it and your library participates in that, which most do now, you can get most comic books, most trade collections are available at the library. If you're like, hey, I'm a reader and I want more, I'd love to own these pieces, but if I can't, I just want to get more stuff, use the library as a resource. But back then, I knew of Galactus from it was a hardcover Fantastic Four collection, which was so odd back then because collections were not like something that we take them for granted now that like, this will be collected eventually. That was not the case even in this era. Some things were, but not like they are today. I remember going to the library and reading that. It was older Marvel books, and really enjoyed that.
It's funny because you talk about just remembering Galactus, remembering from childhood. I have such vague memories of him when we were kids, and from this time period. I remember he was the Planet Eater and all that, destroyer worlds and blah blah blah, that kind of stuff. And I just remember. And I can't think of what issue it was of Fantastic Four, but the Four went up against them, and they only won because Richards was somehow able to convince him to leave Earth alone and destroy some other galaxy. And I can't even remember the specific details of it, or even which Fantastic Four issues it was, or any of that kind of stuff. But again, trying to go back to memories back then, I vaguely knew who he was. So
Reed sicked him on another galaxy?
I could have swore that's what happened.
Okay. It had to have been one where Reed knew it was uninhabited.
Well, I don't remember. All I remember is he had his sights set on Earth, and the Four was going to take him down, was going to stop him, and that's the only way Reed was able to stop him, was to sick him on another galaxy.
That's cool.
And again, I don't remember all the details of the story or even when that came out, I'll be honest with you. But it's always something that does ring through my head from back when, we were kids. I know it's a story from back then. So had to be in the story from the 80s, but that's a long period.
It was funny. Galactus was one of those characters that, because of his size and scale and being a planetary eater, I really remember when I read the Fantastic Four issue with him, liking the character. I was obviously riding along with the Fantastic Four. I he's not like a personality, like with Doom's a personality, right? I mean, so when Doom comes on the scene, you're not getting that with Galactus. Is just kind of like, you guys are all insects and I'm going to eat your world. And that was kind of his thing. The Silver Surfer, actually, I remember him being more of the, we got him more because he was the Herald and he showed up on the scene first, kind of, in preparation for what was going to happen. It was an interesting sort of character. I never remember myself being a big, huge fan of Galactus because I felt like I wanted my heroes to take him down and didn't really get attached to the personality of the character because by design, that's not a thing with him. I really found myself being drawn to him in this, and just the whole Ultron thing was fantastic, where Ultron's up there and he's trying to stand toe-to-toe with Galactus, and Galactus is kind of like, again, this is a world where Galactus has been ripped and put here. Galactus, with just like a finger snap, absorbs the energy from him, just like he would a planet. And I thought that sequence was so cool. I don't remember appreciating that when I was younger the way that I did in this. I was like, oh my gosh, that is an awesome sequence of events. With the way that they handled that, it was like he smacked down Ultron, who we know is a badass, smoked him down like an ant, and that was great.
Oh God, yeah, I loved that sequence. That is absolutely brilliant, and I love the villain's reactions, like, "Whoa, that's amazing!" And then he goes back to not noticing, and then the Beyonder comes in and starts talking to them, the great big booming voice. And I was like, "Oh, this is awesome."
Yeah.
And again, I remember this sequence here with the Beyonder talking to them. Everyone went, oh, wow, oh, my God. And then the next page where Beyonder goes after, Galactus goes after the Beyonder, I didn't remember it being Galactus. I remember Doom. Now, obviously, Doom does follow, but I only remember Doom going after him.
Yeah,
so
we're
when I was reading it this time, I flipped the page, and I'm like, oh, that wasn't Doom going after. That was Galactus going, and Doom was just along for the ride. Because I remember Doom.
Yeah. It was interesting to see the heroes and villains' reaction to the Beyonder when he came out. Because, he's basically, it was pretty iconic. I am from beyond. Slay your enemies, and all of your desires, all you desire shall be yours. Nothing you dream of is impossible for me to accomplish. I like that even it's one of the Wrecking Crew that's saying, he ain't lying. I can tell. I just know. I can feel it. And I mean, that whole idea of that's what this being is, I like that there was a motivation. Other than the fact that we're heroes and you're villains, like why you should fight. It's, I'll give you whatever you want. And Galactus has some needs. And it was interesting to see somebody as powerful as Galactus go, I'm tired of this hunger. All I do is travel from place to place trying to somehow fulfill my hunger. Can you satiate this? Can you do that? His motivation, I thought, was just way cool. I was too young to appreciate what all of that was. That is such a cool sequence with Galactus. I'm like Galactus happy right now, which is so funny for a character that I don't even remember being it. And he's like, this is a great moment.
Oh, exactly. I, again, did not remember him being part of Secret Wars, but, I love just how this goes on. And again, it's giving your villain motivation, why they're doing this, and developing the villain side, not just the hero side. Yeah. It's telling a complete story. This is storytelling 101, and I love it.
This is Spock and V'ger.
Oh, God, yeah.
They're all watching, and Spock gets pushed back out.
Yep.
That was the mind melding with V'ger. This was great, though. When they finally got shoved down planet side, that would be disturbing and disorienting, right? You're pulled from your planet. You're put together with people you weren't with before, sometimes in different outfits. And then all of a sudden you're taken in these little disc things to another planet, trying to kind of hash this together and build a team. I love the portrayal of the X-Men in this, because this was such an era where, yes, they had teamed up with other heroes from time to time, but there was always this tentative relationship of the X-Men, because they were mutants, were different. And people treated them like they were different. They were wary of them. They knew that the X-Men proper were heroes, but they also, like with Magneto, Xavier's trying to rationalize, saying, "This is a pretty powerful dude. We kind of want him on our side, people. Let's all work together. There's a reason why the Beyonder put him with us. He's trying to be the voice of reason." And you've got some of the hotheads who are just ready to hack at each other, similar to what we got on the other side. Because these other teams have encountered Magneto before, he was on the other side of the fence. So in a situation like this, it's like, no, I need somebody I can trust. I need the people. Let's build a team of people at the core that we can trust. We're the Avengers. The Avengers should be teaming up together. Let's trust the Avengers. And like, well, let's hang out. They're tentative on the X-Men right now and out on Magneto. They're like, this dude is no go. It so made sense. This is an example of a writer really being in tune with the universe that is at hand here. Very contemporary. This is where these teams were at this time in the Marvel universe. So as somebody who, if you're not reading every book, which I wasn't at the time, I wanted to, but I wasn't at the time, but I had a familiarity with everybody that I wasn't reading. It was so great to see them interacting with, because I'm Team X-Men at this time. Magneto, by default, because he happens to be who he is, I'm like, well, I'm still Team Magneto on this one. I get why the heroes are reacting the way they are, but like, I want him staying with them, because the alternative, if it's him going with the bad guys, is not the greatest thing in the world.
Right. And I remember, again, reading this, being angry at the heroes for, turning their back on the mutants. I remember this rift of the heroes versus the mutant rift and all that stuff. So again, reading this, you go back through and you really start seeing why they're talking about it. You understand, why they don't trust Magneto, why Xavier and the other mutants are more trusting of him. They're like, hey, we fought him before. We know him better than all of you do combined.
Yeah.
But there's a reason he's with us. I do love Xavier trying to reason with people. And of course, Wolverine and Hawkeye getting ready to go to blows and all that stuff. And even, it was kind of interesting seeing just how this dynamic was playing out. Because again, I remember the animosity, but I don't remember any of the details of the animosity. So this was a really cool read, man.
Well, it's interesting as the team's kind of analyzing who should be running the show over there, and they're, throwing out Reed, they're throwing out Hulk. Hulk makes sense. It's Dr. Robert Bruce Banner. This guy's smart. It's why wouldn't we consider putting, Bruce Banner in charge of things? I like how he's like, listen, guys, I'm with you. I shouldn't be the guy leading right now. I'm happy to be involved. But I like, because of the fact that he's intelligent, there's a logical reason that they're thinking through him. Wasp is an interesting one. And I really appreciated there's a confidence there in the leadership that was something I didn't appreciate at the time. We're on foreign soil. Out of all of us, yes, I am the current, leader of the Avengers. But Cap, considering this mix of people, Cap is the one that they're going to be more likely to follow into battle. It should be Cap. I thought that was such an interesting piece I didn't appreciate so much at the time, because reading X-Men where Storm was the leader of the X-Men, and I'm like, oh, I wanted her. I was Team Storm beating Cyclops back in the day when, remember that fight between?
Yes, I was too, by the way.
Yeah, and I mean,
I loved, and again, side note, I loved how that played out with him and with just the dynamic it created. Mm-hmm. I love that.
So and everything that went along with that particular story. So, it was in this era, I was very used to the idea of Marvel really exploring female leaders and having them in and having some strong ones. I was not reading the Avengers, though. So I didn't have the context of what Wasp was like as a leader. This was making me want to. So this is doing what it's supposed to do, and I wanted to read Fantastic Four. I wanted to read Avengers. I didn't have the budget, though. This is before high school. Mm-hmm. So, my budget, it's like, I'm glad I have this. But it was, and I was lucky enough that I was able to read all 12 issues of this. But this came at a sacrifice, too. It was like reading this meant not reading other things. So I remember I was reading this, and I was reading Uncanny. I wasn't reading much else at the time. It was, trying to stay caught up with all of this because I didn't have a budget, so to speak. Doom and Galactus, seeing those two encounter each other, and Doom's kind of like, for a guy who quests power, it's interesting to see him with Galactus and basically being like, well, Galactus isn't going to be my solution right now. Let me go try and find, somewhere to take charge. And when he walks into the room with the villains, his goal is very singular. It's not about linking them all together. It's not about creating a team dynamic. It is about, what do I need to do and who do I need to pull over to follow me on any level that are going to help me achieve my goals? Everybody else doesn't matter. And it's so Doom's presence in this. And I just loved the way this played out in this with Doom. Because when he walks into a room, it's a very, very different experience.
Oh, God, yeah. And it's funny, stuff that you see now. And I'll be honest, I didn't remember any of these sequences, these initial sequences going through here. I remember the villains, working better as a team than the heroes did. Mm-hmm. So seeing this initial piece was, kind of big. I was like, what? I thought they were all better. They grooved better, but I love how Doc Ock is sitting there, again, the scientist in him, looking at the weaponry, looking at the technology that's available to him. And he's immediately noticing all that kind of stuff. I thought that was kind of cool, showing, again, giving the villains their chance, their due. And even Doom just dropping the building on, that's enough of that. I'm leaving this, and that for me was, again, these moments of having the villains actually say, this is who they are. This is who we are. Taking their time with the story. I love that. And that was something I completely did not remember and was completely lost on me. Because as I said, I remembered the villains being more organized and being more of a cohesive unit.
You're right, though. I mean, and we'll go to that in a minute. Because you're absolutely correct in what you remember. And we'll talk about why. But there's a piece I want to make sure I don't ignore here. So you and I are both, similarly, we weren't versed on Kang during this time, so I was paying attention to this. I remember him blasting Doom out of the sky. I remember that piece. But I don't remember myself thinking this as a kid. Considering that he is supposedly a future descendant of Doom's, I'm questioning the logic of, I get the, I will not let him betray us. You are blasting, what does that do? People aren't thinking about timey-wimey stuff, apparently, at this time. Because if he killed Doom, what does that do to him?
Exactly. And I'll be honest with you, so I know so little about Kang, so I can't even say what was going on with him or any of that. So, yeah, I like that.
I loved it, though. Such a great sequence of events. So the ship was shot down. They're going over to, basically have a run-in with Doom. Doom is his ego driving that piece. When he, I see pity in your eyes. I was a fool to think that because he was really going to Reed Richards, recognizing that working with Reed Richards might make this work. But when he saw the pity and all that, he's like, you will rue this moment because they cared.
Yes.
I love Doom. His whole logic is, sitting there listen, guys, you need to just get on board. You need to be on the same intellectual level that I am and understand that, there is an opportunity for me to get all the power. Why aren't you on board with this?
Yes.
I just love that whole thought process leading to what you're talking about, the cliffhanger of this issue. These are where these little pockets are starting to form. And they're organic pockets that change throughout the series, But you've got your thug-like villains, and I'm oversimplifying them, who have kind of been like, I don't know, he said we kill them? We get whatever we want? I'm all in for that. And they're rallied together, trying to achieve that goal, recognizing if we do it it was actually really smart. We do this during the distraction, we stand a real good shot at wrapping this up pretty quickly. That was fantastic. I really loved the ending. And I remember the organization you're talking about. I don't remember thinking, like, reading the story and catching on to how much that made sense in what that group of villains were doing who typically aren't your brainchild.
And again, I remembered Doom leading them. You know, before
really?
a read through here, I remember Doom taking command of the villains, and that's why the villains were more organized than the heroes were, because they were a cohesive unit under Doom. Mm-hmm. So it was funny reading it this time, going, wait a minute, I could have sworn that Doom was in charge of them, and it was one of those weird things where I was trying to go through my head and wrap my head around it, and again, you know, you do see Doom attacks first before the other villains hit in, so it kind of goes along with, you know, where my spotty memory was coming from. But it was kind of neat to see those villains, and again, it makes sense why the villains are going to work together, because they can get whatever they want. So they're all for the greed side of this. So let's rock and roll, and I love that.
As we jump into issue 2. I remember this cover. I mean, not the cover. I'm sorry. The first splash page vividly, with Cyclops being at the forefront. And I think it's just because I was such an X-Men fan. You know, again, we're seeing people take the lead that aren't the lead of their team on Earth. Scott is a natural leader. Captain America are natural leaders. In this moment, these people are like in the forefront, doing things, even if they're not the actual leader of this group, doing things that are helping get communication out to the larger group. Cyclops is, you know, taking on that piece. And I forgot about this era of Wolverine. You know, we're so used to the evolution of Wolverine that's gone on. This era of Wolverine I loved him so much, because he was such an agent of chaos when he was on a team. Because he was a hero, and we knew that he was a good guy, but you had to dig for that. You know, like, we're under attack, and he's like, good. And he meant it.
Yes.
I forgot how much I loved this guy, this version of Wolverine.
And again, this was some of the heyday of Wolverine, when, you know, he first was that guy that got everyone going, oh, that is so cool. You know, it's you know, I don't even think this wasn't the beginning of Wolverine, but this was really, I think, the time when he really got known to me. You know, this era, I think. Again, I'm trying to remember. It's been so long, my brain. But the one person I 100% did not remember being part of this was Lockheed the Dragon.
Oh, I vividly remembered Lockheed.
I did not remember Lockheed at all. Mm-hmm. You know, and it was kind of neat seeing the dragon rocking and rolling there. You know, and even Wolverine's like, yeah, keep scrapping, go get him, dragon.
I actually made a list of there's if you go on Wikipedia right now, the tie-in issues to Secret Wars are there. If you haven't read them, there's a chance to go back through and read them. I'm going to do it. I remember vividly Uncanny X-Men, where it kicks off to this, and they come back from this. And I remember that being a thing. And it stood out to me so much because that was my first experience with that. I was getting Uncanny X-Men during this time in the mail, in the brown wrapper. You know, it would come in, you know, those old... it was at my mom's house. My mom lived in Wycliffe, and it was a gift that year, was a subscription to Uncanny X-Men. Comic subscriptions at that time was such a cool gift because it guaranteed you were getting that comic for a year. I remember just loving that. I'm like, this is the greatest thing in the world. I hated the fact that they came in the mail and they'd sometimes be like folded or something like that. But the gift was, I was guaranteed I was going to be able to get every single issue of this, and I was going to read them. I remember, though, I would put them between, like, we had encyclopedias in the house, and I remember, like, if it would come a little bit folded, I remember before I ended up reading it, I took the book and I'd put it between two encyclopedias to try and flatten it out.
Nice.
Not because I was looking for it to be mint, but because I mean, I didn't have really that concept then of it, but I wanted this book like as pristine as possible because I wanted to read it over and over again.
Yes.
Which was very different. Because, I mean, I mentioned earlier that, like, I took tracing paper on top of Secret Wars. I was careful with that, though. Like, you know, as far as I didn't want the pencil on the cover. So I remember when I traced it, to be very clear, I wasn't, like, pressing down or anything like that. I traced it as lightly as you possibly could because I didn't want tracing lines on the book. I just wanted to be able to color it.
Yeah.
And somehow I thought in my mind that was making me an artist. But Uncanny X-Men, I remember interacting with this, and that's why Lockheed stood out for me so much. It's funny, I didn't remember Galactus, but I remembered Kitty's dragon being a part of this.
Well, hey, the dragon's cool, you know?
It is. Lockheed was awesome.
Yeah. I love this fight sequence that we get into. Because again, that's something that they're doing well. They did well in this series. Was you get the moments of the team, the moments of the character, and then boom, you get some action, and you get a couple pages of some good fight sequences going on here. You get some really neat battles going on, and I thought for me that again, I don't remember any of the specific fights going on. I do remember that it was a lot of action in this series. You know, when we first started talking about it, I remembered more action and less talk going on.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, but to be honest, there is a great blend of it. So when I'm reading it now, obviously I'm seeing, no, this was a nice blend of some good action sequences that stand out and pop. And I think that's probably why I'm remembering more. Plus, when I read this as a kid, a lot of the story stuff was like blah, 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 talking, fight, talk, fight. You know, and I can remember as a kid looking at comics sometimes that way. So I know why I probably missed some of I don't remember some of the stuff is because I probably skipped through it as a young, stupid kid.
One of the things I always appreciate about comics back then is how long they took me to read. Because, it was an experience when you put time in them, especially with the amount of narration in it. I mean, you're reading this. It is not a quick read. There's a lot of stuff going on with this. If you really want to read it carefully and enjoy it, there's whole narrative sequences that just really, really work in all this, especially with Doom and Kang, unknown to Kang, however, and then we get those whole narrative pieces. I love all different versions of comic book storytelling. It's fun to revisit this style of storytelling because we don't get a lot of this now, with the narrative. And that's not a knock on today's storytelling. You can take a look at different eras of comics and really appreciate the talent and what they were doing in that particular era in how they were crafting story. And the medium is very malleable. And I really love that I was sitting here. I'm like, oh, yeah, I like the way they told stories during this era. This is a really good story. There's a lot of content here to really digest. For people who say, like, I remember back in the day, the big thing was you aren't, like, learning a lot from the funny books. I make a strong argument. I don't know. I loved reading novels and stuff as a kid, but I challenge anybody to look at this content and go, the vocabulary that's being used in this, the quality of the content and storytelling that's being done here, I learned a lot from comics.
Yes. And again, this is a really cool, I know why some people would throw out, oh, you can't learn anything from comics because, there are some comic books out there that are just, funny books, and I can see why you would say, but when you start diving into series like this, and I used to get in arguments with people, discussions, arguments, whatever you want to call them, about comics being a form of literature, and I used to just say, and at the time I would throw out different story arcs, read that and tell me you think that's a funny book.
Yeah.
and there's action going on, there's superheroes, but there's serious stuff that they're talking about. And X-Men was one I always kept throwing out. There's multiple X stories out there that are some serious just explorations of society. Back in the day, there was a lot more detailed exploration, of the nature of people and especially this whole mutant versus human. And a lot of people said, oh, the mutants represent blank, in modern society. You pick any oppressed group and you'll have somebody who can throw out a mutant story saying, see, it's just like so-and-so, just like this, it's just like that. And that was something that one of the reasons I really was always into the X-Men was because I kept seeing just the oppression and just that little kind of storytelling that was being told. Plus, I really did like the characters a lot, It was one of those things where as a kid, as a young kid, I didn't notice that kind of stuff. As I got older, I started seeing the different side of it. And then especially, nowadays, I really, you can see where they went with it. And this Secret War story, again, as I said, I didn't remember as much dialogue. I didn't remember as much character development. I remember the action sequences. I remember the team splitting up, the heroes splitting up, and the villains, presenting, as I said, a more united front. But a lot of these side stories I completely forgot about. And I think that, for me, is one of the reasons I loved reading this story this time, because you get to dive in deep. And again, you see Shooter, he's an amazing creator. He is absolutely amazing storyteller. And this right here is just one of those things where, like, and I can't just say him, his art team, obviously, their work. This was one of those. This is a classic story that the full creation team were firing on all cylinders to tell us. And I was like, I'm so happy we are doing this.
Did you remember Marvel Age magazine?
No.
So I was just reading up on this. So this was announced actually in February of 1984 in Marvel Age News Mag. I remember that. Marvel produced their own news magazine, just kind of a way to, get you excited for that piece. This was originally supposed to be called Cosmic Champions. So this is in the 11th issue from February of 1984 of Marvel Age News Magazine. It was announced as Cosmic Champions. They changed it later. They changed the name. Obviously, we got Marvel Superhero Secret Wars. But the change was actually had to do with Mattel's, because there was a toy line that was going to go along with this. They had a focus group that indicated that children responded positively to the words wars and secret.
Yeah.
So that actually led to the change. Actually, I got to go with Mattel on this one, because Marvel Superhero Cosmic Champions versus Marvel Superhero Secret Wars, the title needed to be Secret Wars.
Yes, I 100% agree with.
Yeah.
And here's something I'll be honest, I just really noticed it now. When we've got Doom going back to where Galactus is, you can see the indent that Galactus is in the ground.
Yeah.
Again, brilliant artwork on just that kind of detail where you put him in, and it's natural. Obviously, he would be in. He got smacked from space and by a massive power blast, and of course that would happen. So I was like, that is awesome, though. I just I'm appreciating just so much on multiple read-throughs.
Storytelling was a little different back then, too. The Doom sequence leading up to that was a recap.
Yeah.
And really that had to do with what you said earlier. You don't always get all the issues. So they have to make sure that, hey, if you didn't read issue 1 and you jumped on issue 2, this is what you need to know about Doom to be able to continue on with this story right now. Now you're up to speed. Watch
Yeah.
I loved Galactus. I do. Now, here's the funny part. I say I didn't remember Galactus. I vividly remembered Galactus getting up. That it wasn't like a standing up like we're used to. I remembered the hovering and standing up. I'm like sitting here, oh yeah, Galactus was in this. I do remember that now. This is the sequence where this was my light bulb moment where I'm like, oh yeah, I do remember this now. I don't know why that made a difference. I think it's because just he doesn't get up the way the rest of us do.
Yeah.
that somehow stuck with me out of this whole piece. And then I remembered him vividly ignoring Doom. Which for Doom has got to be like nails on the chalkboard. And
Yes.
The writing of this was perfect. Because he's like, Galactus. That part is just so not Doom. I remember liking, and I still do right now, the fact that the Beyonder crafted for them these bases, and there's more than one, like of these fortresses around them.
Yes. He put them sporadically throughout the, throughout the planet. And part of it is, I always wondered if he knew that the teams were going to break up, or if he just threw it out there just in case, or what was the motivation behind doing this kind of stuff.
Just, I don't know. They were like mice in a maze to him.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really kind of like, let's see what they do with this stuff I've left them. Because he left them weapons, he left them bases and all that kind of stuff. And I really do think it was just, let's see what the little mice do with all this.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's neat that the villains immediately went to the weaponry. Because they showed the one sequence that showed, Doc Ock was looking at, and studying the powerful weapons, whereas the heroes were more interacting and dealing with themselves and this and that. The villains were on task saying, okay, see this? That's a massive power concussion weapon. That's a massive power. All right, you're on that. You're on that. Attack. And I love just, again, the way the villains are more organized after the initial. And even there's a couple of the heroes saying, hey, we got hit. We got caught off guard. Now we got to recover. And it's, you think back, if the villains had a stronger field general, if Doom had been with them in this initial fight, this fight would have gone dramatically different because, the villains had they caught them on surprise, and that's how they were able to get, the upper hand, the initial. But in a way, the villains start fighting back, and they start, combos and, Hulk and Human Torch hitting them, and, different heroes working together. So it was kind of neat now seeing, okay, time for the second salvo, time for the heroes to, gut check time and come back. And I loved how this played out.
Yeah. That part, what I didn't remember being in this? Rogue. That was another one, too. That, because this was early on in the tenure of Rogue being a member of the X-Men. I didn't remember Rogue being on the planet.
And I actually didn't remember that Sue Storm wasn't there.
I remember that.
I remember clearly Ben and the stuff that happens with Ben. Mm-hmm. I remember that. I remember Johnny was there, and Reed, obviously. And I always thought Sue was there as well. So I completely didn't remember any of that other stuff, the side stuff going on.
Well, and Ben, there's a major, this series has a major change for Ben. So there's a lot going on with this. This is a very pivotal story with this. I loved Mohawk Storm.
Yeah.
From this era. When she had her powers and Mohawk Storm was sweet in this.
I'll be honest with you, Mohawk Storm, and even after she loses her powers, Storm, was, because I've said multiple times on this show, when I was young, I was stupid. I didn't like female superheroes because it's a girl. Mohawk Storm, and No Powered Storm was one of those first introductions to me saying, she's kind of cool. That was the first introduction really for me looking at like a female hero and maybe reading and being excited for a female hero. Because we talked about the fact, just 10 seconds ago about how her versus Cyclops, we were both on Team Storm for that one. Yeah. I wanted to see Storm win that, contest. So I was glad when they did, because again, it was like introduction really for me of this is a cool character. I started kind of looking beyond the fact that it was a girl.
Yeah. It was a great arc.
Oh, God, yeah.
I did remember Lockheed vanishing. It was in the piece after, because I love after the battle's over, Lockheed's gone and Colossus is the one, because it's Kitty's dragon.
Yeah.
And at the point in time, there was a relationship going on with Colossus and Kitty. And I could see that being a thing. Hey, listen, I'm going to be in a little trouble when I go back and don't have her dragon. Lockheed was cool in this when he was used. This is something that I really appreciated, the fact that there were multiple sequences that led to the various factions in all of this. Mm-hmm. Even when Captain America is, starting to kind of rally everybody. I really like that he's like, listen, we got to sit down. We got to talk all this out. We've got to start putting a plan together. Captain America, with his years of experience with various configurations of the Avengers, and we see it with characters like Hawkeye and stuff like that, who are smartasses and things. When he's interacting with the X-Men, Wolverine's not throwing him off. in those pieces. Captain America is very confident being up there.
Yeah.
So when he's rallying everything, he's reacting to what Wolverine's saying, but not getting thrown by what Wolverine's saying. This was some great writing of Cap. I really enjoyed how they used him in these sequences.
Oh, God, yeah. And again, I remember always thinking Cap should be the leader.
Yeah.
I 100% remember, as I'm reading this saying, yeah, of course, Cap's the leader. And, again, he has that. He is not a... he's not hesitating. He doesn't hesitate. He's not a reluctant leader. Sorry, I had to say it.
Here's the thing. Neither is Superman, and you know it. What's interesting is Magneto. They do a good job of taking screen time. Magneto's alone.
Yeah.
And they give him a great moment of introspection. He's looking at this world. He's like, I wonder, do the others feel the same sense of destiny I feel? Not long ago, such a thought would never have occurred to me, that the hearts of ordinary men might share a feeling with the heart of one of the Homo superior race. It was so cool that in this moment, they're in this big battle, and Magneto's like, hang on a second here. I never saw this coming. Magneto's complexities is something that they really have done a really good job with over the years, making him more than just the baddie of the X-Men. They've evolved him and grown him over time, where he's a smart guy. And I like that he has major distinctions from Doom in this.
Well, and I could tell you, I love Homo superior comment.
Yeah.
I've always, again, it was one of those things where I remember as a kid wanting to be one of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants sometimes, because there were some cool moments when you're just looking at, all the, the crap that the mutants went through, and you're like, I can understand why they would do it. I can understand that, but then you look into the X-Men, how they're like, no, we can't, give in to that. We've got to fight that. We've got to, and there's always that great duality. And, and Magneto is just, when you get the right person writing him, he is just an awesome character. And I love this stuff. And, again, it's one of those things where you're just going back and remembering, oh yeah, I remember that era of Magneto when he was really a villain, but it was that concept of the villain, but he was a villain with a reason. It wasn't about, stealing. It wasn't about, world conquest or anything like that. It was about protecting his people. And I loved how that, that duality kind of always played out with him.
I love when they come back and he's like, greetings, welcome to Doom Base.
Yes.
I love that. It's like all of a sudden it's like finders keepers. You left your home, now it's mine. And that part was great.
Yep.
And Doom had planned for them to come back. That was the whole Ultron thing. It's like, I got to wrangle these people in. The only way that's happening is if I have a way to do it. His rebuilding Ultron was absolutely fantastic. And that was a piece I vaguely remember. And I want to say vaguely, extremely, like on a surface level, remembering it. It read so much better because I didn't fully remember it.
Oh, God, yeah, man. I tell you. And I love, reading Doom here. Because, one, he blasts them with some power. And he flexes his muscle, and the bad guy's like, oh, okay, sure. You're in charge? Okay with me. But there's still then Doom's playing stuff. The Molecule Man. Oh, Mr. Reese is that, I believe. And just, knowing that he's got to be, can't treat him with the same iron hand that he does the Wrecking Crew. And then talking, actually, I don't want to say talking to him as if he's an equal, but giving the respect to Doc Ock because Doc Ock is intelligent. And Doc recognizing Doom's up to something. This isn't just about the contest that the Beyonder has for us. Yeah. He's got plans beyond that. He's got his own plans, and maybe we'll be able to benefit from it, or maybe Doom will kill us. So I love just seeing Doc Ock not just blindly following Doom. He's going to follow Doom because it makes sense, but he's keeping an eye on him, and I love that.
It's interesting where for Doom, what's been put before him is never enough. Doom has got to have absolute power.
Yes.
It's funny how I can't help but wonder if, like, Doom had maybe just pulled back and, like, oh, maybe I'll just go and achieve my goal here. Maybe he just would have gotten all that. But it's not, for Doom, it's not enough to get it that way, right? It's such an interesting way of going about all of this. I really enjoyed seeing the relationship, because I always liked this with heroes. It's something I always liked in DC. It's something I always liked in Marvel. I always felt I got it more in Marvel Comics, where these moments like you see with She-Hulk and Wasp.
Yeah.
Where, you know, there's a reaction to this. There's a human reaction to this. And these are two friends who clearly, you know, I didn't know so much about the relationship between She-Hulk and Wasp, you know, on the Avengers and what that all looked like at that point in time, to understand, you know, that relationship. This was telling me what that was like. And that part really stood out for me. This leading to moments with Cyclops and Reed Richards.
Yeah.
These are real people. And it's something I always liked in comics. And I felt like this was the age where I was really appreciating the idea that the more real these characters were written, the more fully realized with having real lives and real feelings and families back home and things they wanted to get back to. Reed and Cyclops connecting over these two pieces made them feel more real to me. And I wanted them to get along. Ben having the reaction that he did, where he's like sitting here, I'm probably never going to see Alicia again, and that's probably the best for her. He told me something about the Thing and his insecurities at a time in my life where I had my own.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how much of an impact these characters were having on me, where I'm like, I can relate to them and what they're going to. You know, I was uncomfortable in my own skin in these years. I had no idea of the fact that reading Secret Wars, I'm like, I don't know, I'm connecting with these characters in a way I didn't realize I was doing. It was so super cool.
Oh, God, yeah. And again, I remember, again, I don't really remember a lot of the conversations. And I know as a kid, this kind of stuff just went over my head, you know, and, you know, it's one of those things where I was like, that's one of the reasons I've been going back through and reading a lot of the comics that I read when we were younger, because I want to, you know, get more of a connection to it. And this page, I guarantee when I was a little kid, I probably just skipped right over it. I probably, okay, yeah. Again, talking, action. That's what I want. You know, and I would have flipped right to the next page with Spidey and Johnny. And again, cool dialogue, cool interaction between these two. But again, thing that would always draw my attention when I was a kid is seeing the Spidey sense tingling, him going into action, Johnny throwing up the 4, you know, in the sky as a signal. You know, it's, you know, there's, you know, that's something I love about the series now, that I'm seeing these really cool, great character development moments, and he's not, you know, just doing a full book on that. They're still giving us some action stuff. You know, Magneto breaking into the hero's base to steal their power plant was absolutely brilliant on Magneto. You know, a couple issues before, you know, last issue, he's saying, "Oh no, I'm one of you. I was put with you guys. You don't need to attack me." And here he's stealing their power plant. Good job, Mags.
Well, in fairness, they weren't listening to Charles.
Yeah.
Where Charles is basically saying, hey, we're better off with him on our side.
Yes.
So, you know, if he's going to be every man for himself, Magneto's going to have to start, you know, shoring things up so that way he can actually pull that off. Spidey and Human Torch. I remember this relationship being a pivotal one growing up because of Marvel Team Up and books like that. And actually in Spidey's own book, I remember he and the Human Torch being buddies. And that being much more my gateway into Fantastic Four than anything else. So these two being together and just having that familiarity was something that stood out to me. See, I love pages like this. This was something growing up. I vividly remember these pages because this was something I think it was just, this was the era for me where I was looking for the reality. You know, I didn't want these to now be toys. I didn't want them to be, you know, don't just give me just the action. Make me believe that these are living, breathing people, that under the mask is somebody with a life, with feelings, with thoughts, somebody I can relate to, somebody I could hang with. Like the idea of me being in that place and sitting with those guys and having this conversation was the coolest thing in the world they could throw in front of me, which was awesome at this stage. In this stage of my life, this was the stuff that like really stood out to me.
Yeah, Spidey always had that connection.
Yep.
I can't. I don't think I've ever met anybody who didn't have that kind of that buddy hangout with the Spidey. Yeah, and me too. I'm right in. I'm in with everybody else, and I know for a fact my brother Bill right now is listening to us, nodding his head, saying, "Of course, he still has that connection with Spidey." So that's the way that character was created, and when you get the really good writers who are handling that kind of side of him, even when you get the more adult Spider-Man. And he's not just the kid anymore. You still get that same kind of connection because he's your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He is that guy that you want to hang out with. He's Dick Grayson of this universe. Dick Grayson's that guy that everybody wants to be able to hang out with. Because he's just that cool. Spidey has that same kind of connection, that same kind of, yes, I'm with Spidey. Spider-Man says you're cool, I'm with him. Cap's a guy I'd fall into battle without hesitation. But Spidey is that guy that I'm like, okay, what's your thoughts on this, Spidey?
I love the wahoo-hoo with Magneto. I did remember that. Yeah. It was cool to see Magneto, kind of take his piece. Spidey kind of going into action. And the smart part is the way the two of them split up.
Yeah.
Spidey was like trying to get the ball rolling as far as mounting some kind of defense over there while the Human Torch was rallying. It was so much smarter than if the two of them went in together. I really loved the thinking with the two of them. They're such a great partnership.
Yes. Well, and again, there is that friendship and that, and that's been in multiple, they've had multiple team ups, Spidey and the Four. And I like that.
Yeah. Ben Grimm turning back into a human. I didn't remember it until I saw it. And then I'm like, oh yeah, that happened. What I didn't remember when I was reading it was like, how long does this happen in the story? What does this look like? Those were pieces that I was wrapping my head around as I was watching, reading this piece. But it was something that this is something that Ben has wanted for so long, but it happened here.
At the wrong time.
Yes.
And again, I remember, this is one of those things that I vividly remember from the childhood of Ben becoming human again.
Yep.
But like you, I didn't remember what issue it happened in, how soon it happened, and all that kind of stuff. So again, reading this was like, oh, okay, here's where it happened. Oh, that's cool. I remember this, and it was another great way to end the issue. Because, I 100% did not remember Magneto kidnapping Wasp. That I completely did not have. And I'll be honest, I had a vague recollection of her even being there. But that sequence did not imagine that. And again, them looking at, studying what's going on with Beyonder. With Galactus, and just having the overall, holy crud, we've got something going on here. It was a really cool ending to the issue. That's something that this series did a great job with, where every issue is that massive cliffhanger issue.
Yeah, I agree. The idea that they wanted to go after Magneto, I really liked this part. They can't go after Magneto because they're about to be attacked.
Yeah.
And the idea that you got to hold on to your base and try to keep that makes a ton of sense when you're on a battle world like this. So everything about that made sense. I love the issue 3 cover. And these covers, as I was rereading this series and I was looking at them, I'm like, wow, I remember all of these covers. And there was something special about each one. Because I know it does switch to Bob Layton at a certain point doing art. I remember he did fill-in issues. But and I love Bob Layton's art. But Mike Zeck, my goodness, was Mike Zeck killing it.
Yes.
What he was doing with this particular story.
Oh, God, yeah. And it's funny. Issue 3, I remember parts of it. Mm-hmm. But then there's parts where I'm completely no recollection of at all.
Yeah.
Like this opening sequence with Magneto being Mr. Smooth, with the Wasp. I did not remember any of that.
Really? Really? I had vivid memories of this.
I had no memory of this at all. So when I'm reading it, I'm like, what the heck, Magneto? What the heck's going on here? And I remember just this during our getting ready for the podcast. I was like, I don't remember this. I'm like, way to go, Mags. All right.
Well, and his point's a valid one. They're like stuck on this place and not sure if they can get back.
Yep.
So he's actually making some interesting moves here at the moment that actually make a lot of logical sense when you think about it. It's like, okay, I don't know that we're going home. What do I want this to look like if I stay here? And everything about what he was doing there just made, I was nodding along going, I kind of get what he's doing as far as setting himself up. Editor's notes in this, when they were referring to Ben Grimm, the thing and how he reverted back to normal, I really appreciated like that. I mentioned it last issue with Doom and the fact that we got the recap there. The editor's note here reminding us what happened last issue. I forgot how much I enjoyed that. Some of that, it's coming back in some of our comics now where we're starting to see some more of these. I really appreciate them when they're there now because I read a lot of comics. So even with current comics, sometimes it's nice to have a little editor's note. And if you remember in last issue, you dolt, this happened. Or if you missed last issue, which that's not really what happens now for me. But for me, it really is the dolt piece. It's like, I don't know, I'm reading like 8 different things. It'd be nice when I come back to this one. Oh, yeah, he was fighting this person and this happened to him. Thank you. We can move forward now. That stuff I really appreciate.
Oh, God, yeah. And again, it's kind of neat. You think back to just, again, editor's notes, I'm 100% agreeing with you. I want these back. I like these. I like editor's notes. And there's times, in some of the modern books, I'm like, when did that happen? And you got to do some research. But this sequence, I didn't remember any of the Magneto stuff. And I don't think I remember even just the storm going on. And I loved how they're using the storm to tell the story.
Yeah.
Magneto's keeping Wasp around because of the storm. You're not going to go anywhere. The heroes are hunkering down, repairing the stuff, the damage that Magneto did. Thor's out there doing his Thor thing, taking care of the big chunks of rocks and whatnot. And I do like how they're using the environment at the end. Just tell us a little bit about the characters. Give us, if you don't know who Thor is, if you don't know who, the Fantastic Four or, Wasp are, this is a good way to just give you an idea on what these characters' groove is.
What's interesting about this, too, is this becomes an ideal environment for Storm.
Yeah.
For Thor. For a lot of these characters. And Storm referenced it at one point earlier, how the atmosphere and everything was perfect for her to use her powers. It was back when, we were commenting on how much we dug Mohawk Storm. She was talking about that piece. Yeah. And, we see it continue here when Thor is dealing with the storm. It's such an interesting way that this world was crafted. What I don't remember, I never remembered roller skating Iron Man.
Yeah. Yes, I do not remember that one either.
His jet roller skates or whatever was going on there. I'm like, I love Iron Man. I've always loved the concept of Iron Man. I think mainly because I always felt like I could be Iron Man. You put on a suit and you're Iron Man. So you don't need to have powers. Right. He just, like, your suit can be upgraded and every so often you can do all these cool things. So I always liked Iron Man as a concept. I do not remember the skates.
At all. Not even vaguely.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, I didn't notice it until my art read through, just, when when I was doing the reading.
Really?
And that was something I was like, is he on roller skates? When did that happen?
Yeah, the reason why it's shocking me so much is I did notice it my first read through this time around. I'm surprised it didn't stand out to me more in the past as being something that was like, wow. Why? He can fly. I just kept thinking as I was watching Captain Marvel flying next to him. I'm like, why? Why wouldn't he just be doing what she's doing?
Well, also, why isn't Storm out there also? Because I think that she would be able to. I'd be curious to see if she could control the storm.
Well, you see why later on.
Yeah.
the X-Men are having a summit of their own. She can't be out there right now because the X-Men are making some serious decisions. So you're asking a great question, but it's you're not the only one asking it. Spidey was checking to see what was going on with them. It actually matches the story.
Yeah.
Storm not being out there is like, where are these guys at? Spidey's kind of looking around trying to see what's going on, and they're having a very private conversation. This makes sense, though, right?
Yes.
Considering the X-Men and where they were at the time and what some of the reactions have been to them, they as a team need to kind of regroup. I forgot this was an era where Charles was walking.
Yeah, me too, actually. That again, I always get confused when he's walking, when he's not walking, and whether it was the Beyonder who healed him or any of that kind of stuff. So it is always interesting when you see him walking about.
Yeah. And the part really works. Spidey misunderstanding what was going on here causes a whole other problem.
Yeah.
Because they really were just trying to figure out what was going on and kind of making a plan of their own to try and interact with everybody else. They weren't really turning on anybody. It wasn't like one of those sequences. The chaos of all this kind of caused a whole big issue here. Especially, go ahead.
Well, it's especially because they're talking about going and reaching out to Magneto, because they're talking about joining, prepare yourselves, we go to join Magneto, and they're not looking to join Magneto to turn against the heroes. It's more of a join Magneto, trying to get everybody working together again. But Spidey's not completely following the groove.
Yeah. And that was something that was pretty cool in this whole piece.
Yeah, and again, I love it when Spidey really throws down. When you get it, because Spider-Man can really go. He's fun, he's awesome, but you think about it, he just took down the X-Men. Granted, it was part of a sneak attack, catching him off guard, but he still was able to, take down, the team. And it wasn't until Xavier recovers that he's able to use the mind wipey stuff. But before that, Spidey's took down the X-Men. And I thought that was awesome. And I love how he's going to Richards to try to tell him what's going on, and Xavier gets to him. And I love that Xavier doesn't like doing that, but he needed to for the X-Men.
Well, Spidey's a survivor. So it's interesting when you say taking down the X-Men. It wasn't that so much as delaying them, being able to create space for himself. So he got out because they were back up again right away going after him. But Spidey is really, really good at using the webbing he tied down Nightcrawler for a bit. He tied up Rogue for a bit. Was able to use his spider strength to get Wolverine out of the way. But, they're all back right at, the next page, next panel, they're right back at him. But his way of being able to, through his experience, because he's dealt with the Sinister Six, people like that, he's an expert at creating space, creating opportunities for motion and momentum and navigating a space. Super cool. It was something that I really enjoyed. The piece where Cyclops is talking to Reed, but in his head, he's also thinking about Xavier and what's going on, because Xavier's shouting orders and kind of becoming the field lead for the X-Men at a time where he's like, wait a minute, is Charles really ready for this? I get that he's walking now and things like that. This is something that was also a theme going on in Uncanny X-Men, because Charles had an outfit and Charles was trying to do what Scott's worried about. And some of what Scott's concerns are something I loved the energy of. This has a continuity to it, and it's following things that are really going on with these characters. If you aren't reading these books, what a great way to get drawn into the interpersonal relationships of these characters when they're together. Oh, God, yeah. And again, when it comes to this stuff, I am agreeing with Cyclops on it. Xavier may be Xavier, but is he a field general? Mm-hmm. There's a big difference on that kind of stuff. And I do like how just a couple little panels throw out stuff that's currently going on in the X books at this time. Yeah, and I think that's really important for all of these books because it gets you intrigued. This is really a study into how to use a mega crossover as a way to get people interested into other titles that they may not be reading and other characters that they may not have had exposure to. As an X-Men fan, seeing Magneto with his growing relationship with Wasp in all of this piece, and I like that she's not just immediately, I'm following along with what he's saying. They're having some real conversations between the two of them at a time where there's storms going on with them. They've been ripped away from their planet. I get why this happens. Like the kiss between the two of them and her reluctance to kiss him, but yet finding something compelling with what's going on with Magneto. All of that fits. Like, it didn't seem strange to me at all. It was actually incredible writing because they didn't jump to this. This was something that built based on their talking to each other as they were going through. When we agree that when my eyes meet yours, there's something electric. That piece was really, really interesting between the two of them, where I could see him being kind of the forbidden fruit, but also being like, we're like maybe stuck here. And this would be something that would be attractive, finding comfort into some form of normal in this, which is weird to say that that's normal, but it's much more normal than what they're dealing with on the outside of this place.
Now, it was funny. The Doom and Magneto sequence, I don't remember Doom reaching out to Magneto, and then, after Doom has his moment, after Magneto has his moments, and I agree with you. I liked how they played it out, let it build a little bit and, where it's going and, who knows what's going on. You go back to the Doom base.
Yeah.
And it shows Doom going, okay, well, his mistake, he's, he doesn't recognize that Doom is Doom and he's going to learn. But the powering of the two female heroes, I remember them being in the story, but I didn't remember them getting charged up by Doom. Doom being the one to bring out the power in them. So it was kind of neat watching this going, because when you first see them standing there, I'm like, wait a minute, I remember them, and then you see them fully powered. Like, I did not remember that's how they got their powers, was from Doom. It was kind of one of those neat things where stuff I remember, but not every detail of it.
Yeah. I remembered, if you were to ask me before, like if you quizzed me beforehand, I wouldn't have remembered that. Like, how did Titania come about in this? I remembered her vividly, as a character being in this. It was when it was happening, though, and I was reading this as I was going through it, I'm like, oh, I do remember that. That was cool. Doom's experimentation and Doom's intelligence and his smarts, it reminded me so much of, like, why is he the perfect villain for Reed Richards? And it's because they share things in common. And that part is, like, really, really well handled in all of this.
Yeah, and again, it's funny, Volcana and Titania, yeah. Titania. Again, I remember them vividly in there, especially Volcania for the stuff that happens later on with her. And it was neat seeing, again, Doom being Doom here. He's planning, he's building up his team, he's adding to his forces. He's lost some villains, so I need to replace them. And I love just seeing Doom be Doom here, where it's, and again, the villain's interaction completely different than the hero's reaction. There's a lot of guys who are pure henchmen, and they're just sitting around waiting to do their thing. And then there's some who are the leaders, the leader structure, and, they're, doing what they're doing. So it was kind of a neat, just again, this neat dynamic that they're giving the villains.
What's interesting, and I think it is Titania, because I'm adding another vowel, I think, in there. So I think it's Titania and Volcana. You're looking at them. Absorbing Man and his first interaction with her so fit his character. Because I do love that he was the one that was like, hey, you want to be in charge, Doom? You go right ahead. It so fits his character the way that, he's like, he was fighting with him 1 minute, then the next minute he's like, all right, you want to be in charge? I don't even really care. Yeah, that's not what I'm after. When he's hanging out with her, he is so well written as being just everything that his personality would indicate who he is. He's a character who I remember vividly in Marvel, popping up in various team-up books because of the fact that he would touch walls and would touch different things and take on their consistency. And that part was such a very, very cool thing.
Oh, God, yeah. And again, slime balls. 100% slime balls. And they're good. They're written so well that, yes, we 100% know these guys are the villains. I love that. And the interactions of Molecule Man here.
Oh, yes.
The beginning of this relationship.
Love this relationship.
Oh, my God. And this, again, I vividly remember this relationship. This is one of the things I 100% remember from Secret Wars. And I think that was something that they built it so well because I really had no idea who either of these people were, before any of this happened. And as a kid, I can remember seeing that going, oh, that's cool. And then as an adult, I remember, it playing out.
The heroes not killing the villains and even healing the villains was something that I didn't remember until I was reading it through, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess that was a thing back then.
Yeah.
That I really, it made me feel like, they're much more heroic in doing those pieces. They've got a code, and I always liked the code. I didn't remember that sequence, but man, did I love it. It was, really, really well done in this. Captain America and the Hulk have that interaction. I forgot that Intelligent Hulk also had an intelligent temper.
Yes.
And I enjoy that this really is kind of an amalgamation of the Beastly Hulk and the Intelligent Hulk, that we're seeing a lot more of those pieces that are in there. You get kind of how these flare-outs would happen with them. But that was something I thought that was really, really well handled as well. Just seeing those moments that your interest in reading more Hulk or reading Hulk from this is exactly what I was feeling when rereading this. I've read Hulk over the years. The Peter David run in particular is one of my favorite. But there's been some real, Immortal Hulk that was out recently. It was really, really good. The Joe Fixit era that you're talking about was really, really good. So there's so much good Hulk to read that's out there. But I really enjoy that character quite a bit. The continued opportunities for battle in all of this, especially them being in just these different configurations, because Volcana and Titania now entering into the mix and really being used to kind of test out their powers. I mean, you're going head toe-to-toe with She-Hulk. Yeah, granted, catching her by surprise, but that was really impressive to me.
Oh, God, yeah. And again, once again, the villains are on the ball.
Yeah.
Cap was taking a nap, and he wanted the Hulk to wake him up when the storm broke, and Hulk is the Hulk, and he forgot. So the villains are going in, and I love Doom's comment about, I thought better of Captain America and Reed Richards.
Yeah.
A little dig right there going, they should have been ready for us.
Well,
but they're not.
To his point, though, Cap was on that. Cap had put that in place knowing that he would need to be alert for this. And the only reason why they caught them unawares is that team wasn't following the plan.
Yep.
So that worked really well. I liked seeing an opportunity for the villains to win. The villains to kind of take they not the war, but they won the battle. And that was really, really a cool cliffhanger in this. I can't wait next episode to talk about issue 4. Because there's so much of that I want to enjoy talking about. This series, I mean, going 30 days after this to then have to figure out what happens to these heroes. I remember this vividly. What that was like. That's where I was rereading a lot. I would go back through and reread these issues and do my little tracing and stuff like that I was doing. That tracing, by the way, was exclusive to the issue 1 cover that I was doing that with. I don't remember doing that with the other covers. I think that was also a sign that I was not destined to become an artist.
Yeah.
Like, I was having fun with that, but, like, I didn't have the passion for it. Like, I'm endlessly impressed. Anybody listening to this that's an artist on any level, I'm endlessly impressed with you because there's a discipline to it and there's a practice to it and those pieces. I learned very quickly that my delusion of somehow being a comic book artist was just that.
Yeah, that was something I quickly... Art and drawing and whatnot, just I knew right away I was never good at it. So, again, it's one of those things where when I was younger, I think I probably traced books. I probably did, but I don't have any recollection of really having any, I'm going to be an artist, because I knew it was never going to happen.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. This is a great series. I'm really glad we've had the opportunity to start this really deep look at this. It's great to revisit a lot of what was going on with these characters, and it is, like you, it's churning an interest of me of other characters we're going to talk about down the line. Very similar to when we've looked at DC stuff. Similarly, I actually really like this. What we're doing with season 2 of the show, where we are, doing a Marvel story, doing a DC story, doing something independent, and kind of shuffling around, just because I find that I am enjoying so much about comics now, old and new. It's last night. It was current books, and was really just I could not stop reading. There's so much good stuff out right now.
It seems to run on some form of electricity.
I'd like to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. We love having you part of the show. RagingBullets@gmail.com is, of course, our email address. You prefer to contact us that way. RagingBullets.com is our show website. It feeds into X/Twitter, and it also feeds into our Facebook fan page. We are proud to be part of a great Facebook group community. That also acts as kind of a forum for us as well. So if you want to comment on any of our episodes, please go ahead and feel free to join that group and give us your comments. And we love having you part of the show that way. The About Us section of our show websites, where you can connect with us on personal pages and gaming platforms. Every other week, I'm on Is It Jaws, a film review podcast, which I'm proud to be co-host on with Paul Spataro, and we appreciate him inviting me onto that show. We are sponsored, as always, by DCB Service and InStockTrades.com. Mr. Seiglin, I promise I'll leave you alone. Please tell us what's going on over at DCBService.com.
Hey, we've got this great giant-size X-Men tribute to Wayne and Cochran. This has it's a trade paper, 36% off, $19.19. And again, this collects the original tribute as well as the original issue of Giant Size X-Men. So thank you, DCBS. I must read this now.
Yeah, and I highly recommend it. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pounce on your head before, but it was one of those where I just wanted to shout it out because it was something I've read before. It's very good. So for anybody that's an X-Men fan, that, like, if you read Giant Size X-Men 1 and not read this new version of it, it's exactly what it's meant to be, a tribute. I just love that they did it. Over at InStockTrades.com, DC's finest, Teen Titans, the Judas Contract trade paperback. Highly recommend this story. $39.99 regularly, 55% off, only $17.99. I'm loving these DC's finest that they're putting out there. I think they're doing a great job of keeping these stories in print. Flash by Mark Waid. Omnibus hardcover volume 2. $150 regularly, 50% off, only $75. 2 different cover versions of Secret Wars by Hickman. Omnibus hardcover. $100 regularly, 46% off, only $54. And Vinland Saga Deluxe Edition hardcover, Volume 6, $54.99 regularly, 45% off, only $30.24. Thank you, DCB Service and InStockTrades.com, for supporting our show. Our next episode, we're going to be back with Part 2 of this 4-part look at Marvel Superhero Secret Wars. We will see you then.
Bye!
From the great outskirts of Cleveland to wherever you may roam, Sean and Jim thank you for listening to the Raging Bullets podcast show.